Hi everyone, welcome to the March 11th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and this week we're looking forward to the Saturday card at Tampa Bay Downs featuring the Grade 2 Tampa Bay Derby, that final Derby prep in Oldsmar, Florida, offering 50 Kentucky Derby qualifying points to the winner. Also on that card, we've got four other stakes races, and we're going to talk about all of them as part of the late pick 5 sequence there, the all stakes late pick 5 sequence, which spans races 7 through 11, ending in that Tampa Bay Derby. The other stakes we'll discuss are the Hillsborough, the Challenger, and then the Florida Oaks and Columbia, both of those turf races for the 3-year-olds. Craig, it's a pretty interesting sequence, though. It's one that could get a little bit messed up by weather, because I saw there is some rain predicted in the area for kind of early to mid-afternoon on Saturday. So we're going to have to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, it's always a threat in Florida, it seems like, where it could rain later in the day. We'll just have to see. I would hope that they would keep the turf races on the turf. They have a really nice course at Tampa. It always looks like it's in great shape. So I would plan to handicap for maybe a little bit of an off course. So.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the weather forecast now. It seems like the rain at this point is predicted to come sometime between 8 a.m. and probably ending by 1 p.m. on Saturday, with about half an inch predicted. So we'll see how that plays out. It seems like there's a high likelihood they'll get something. It's just a matter of how much and whether or not the track can dry out by later in the day. But we're going to talk about these races as if they're scheduled for the turf, and there are 3 turf races that are part of this sequence. So we'll try to, talk about maybe for some wetter turf conditions, if that is the case. But I don't think it's going to be a situation where they have to pull the grass races off the turf, or at least I'm hoping that's not the case, as Craig alluded to. Craig, let's dive right in and begin with the 7th race, that Grade 2 Hillsborough. This one is going 1.1 miles on the turf for the fillies and mares, and it's a pretty interesting field. We've got a couple Chad Brown runners in here, including some horses that are exiting the local prep for this race. The Grade 3 Endeavor, that was won by Bleecker Street, who has really been an overachiever for the Chad Brown barn. She's won all 4 starts in her career. I don't think even her connections expected her to get as good as she's ultimately gotten when she began her career at Monmouth Park last year, but she just keeps improving in every race, and I guess she's the horse to beat. She's the favorite on the morning line, but it's a tougher spot than last time.
Yeah, it is for sure, and so far she keeps answering every question. She didn't really get back last time off of those 3 straight wins because she hadn't run particularly fast, but she did run a good 1:13 TimeformUS speed figure. But the waters do get a little deeper here. I guess the second choice on the morning line is Lady Spear, so maybe we should start there. She is a horse who I think is going to be kind of dangerous in here and will be on my tickets just because I have a pretty good idea she's going to be alone on the lead. Now, we show another horse in here, Nantucket Red, up on the front end with Lady Spear just off of her. But I suspect that's largely because of her dirt race. Her turf races, including against these last time, she's just not as fast, I don't think. So I think Lady Spear is a little dangerous, but the horse I'm most interested in is the other Chad Brown. And I say the other only because of the morning line. She's 9-2 on the morning line, but it's Irad Ortiz, it's Chad Brown. She's a horse who shipped over last summer from overseas, ran in the Grade 3 Saratoga Oaks. It's a Grade 3, but we all know it has that huge purse. I think it's like $700,000 or something like that. And though she didn't really run that day, she was bet. She obviously showed some promise. Something went wrong that day. She gets first-time Lasix. I don't think there's any way we're getting 9-2 on this horse. Maybe more like a 5-2, 3-1 shot. But I think she's really dangerous, and she'd be my top pick.
Yeah, she's a horse that I think you do have to develop an opinion about, because I'm kind of with you. I think she's going to get bet down in this race. When you see 2 horses from the same connections, and not just Chad Brown, but they're both Peter Brandt-owned horses, and one is ridden by Hector Diaz, and the other is ridden by Irad Ortiz, you would kind of assume that Irad Ortiz horse is going to be the one that takes more money. Obviously, Bleecker Street is coming in with this superior form, but sometimes that doesn't weigh too heavily in the minds of the bettors. And do keep in mind, Bleecker Street was 7-1 when she won last time, despite going out for the Chad Brown barn. So I do feel like Rocky Sky could take a lot of money in this race. How short she goes, I'm not really sure. But I don't know, Craig. I'm not as positive on her as you are. She has one race on her form that makes her remotely competitive. That was her race 2 back at Navan in Ireland when she won all the way back in April of her 3-year-old season. And that was the race that kind of prompted her to be privately purchased and transferred to Chad Brown. She led from gate to wire that day, did so impressively, but she was a big long shot coming off a series of all-weather races. Not sure that form is really held up. She was a big disappointment, as you said, in the Saratoga Oaks last year. Just kind of racing a little bit like a horse that wanted to be on the lead, but wasn't really fast enough to get there. And I don't think she's fast enough to get to the lead in this race. She's never shown that she really has that much willingness to pass horses. So I don't know. They're handling her like she's a good horse by running her in here, but I'm a little skeptical of this one. And if she's going to be a short price, she's a horse that I would like to try to beat. And frankly, I'd be trying to beat both Chad Brown horses in this race. Not that I'm way against Bleecker Street, and we'll see if she drifts up from that 2-1. But I kind of agree with you, Craig, that I think this is a slightly tougher spot. And I actually kind of prefer Lady Spitespear out of that Endeavor Stakes last time. I thought Lady Spitespear ran pretty well considering that she had to stalk the pace. I agree that she could find herself on the lead here, though I will note that the horse that was that is predicted to be in front of her on the pace projector, Nantucket Red, she was extremely rank rating behind horses in that race last time. So I wonder if the connections are going to get aggressive with her, trying to get her to settle in this race. How fast she is, and if she's fast enough to get ahead of Lady Spitespear, I think remains to be seen. The horse, though, that interests me most, that I would make my top pick, is the number 7, Runaway Rumor. She's not the winningest type. She took the first 3 starts of her career in succession, and then she's lost 5 in a row after that. But I think she's actually continued improving despite losing her last several races. I thought she ran the best race 2 back in the Sands Point when she lost to Fluffy Socks. She was wide most of the way and was still finishing well. Got a 1:17 TimeformUS speed figure, which frankly puts her right in line with Lady Spitespear and ahead of some of the Chad Brown trainees. And then after that, in the Winter Memories, that was a race that was totally dominated by horses that rode the rail for almost their entire trips. And it's not like Runaway Rumor was that wide, but she was 2 to 3 wide most of the way. And I think that was probably the difference between first and fifth in a race like that was so competitive like that Winter Memories. So I think that Runaway Rumor making her 4-year-old debut does not have to improve that much off her 3-year-old form. And the Jorge Abreu barn, which has been pretty quiet through the winter, has started to come alive recently. Had a winner at Aqueduct in the Busher last week, had a nice priced winner at Gulfstream this week. So I feel like she's one that could be sitting on a big race.
Yeah, she's going to be on my tickets. My only real knock on her was Jorge Abreu, who doesn't really do all that well off of layoffs. Speed figure wise, she fits. She's probably the fastest horse in here. When you look, she's had those back-to-back 117s, which came as a 3-year-old back in October and November. So with any improvement, she definitely stands out. But as I said, the one thing that kept me from making her the top pick was his trainer stats.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was talking about this, I believe, on another podcast when I handicapped the Gothic card last week, that Jorge Abreu just kind of took the winter off this year, something that he hasn't done in the past. Basically, all of his horses went on the shelf. He started very few horses at Aqueduct or at Gulfstream. So almost every horse in his barn is going to be coming off a layoff in the next couple months. And the last 2 that he sent out off similar layoffs have actually won, I think, at odds of 5-1 and 10-1. So maybe those stats are changing direction a little bit for him a bit. Sometimes those stats are more due to trainer intention, and when they change intention, the stats change. We'll see if that's the case for him.
Yeah, that's a good catch. It's something I did not pick up on.
Let's move on to race 8, over to the dirt course, to the Grade 3 Challenger, a race run at the same distance as the Tampa Bay Derby. This one, though, for the older horses. And Craig, I think this is a pretty nice field. We've got some horses that are familiar names from last year that were 3-year-olds now coming back for their 4-year-old season. And I think chief among them, the one that everybody's kind of been waiting for to come back, is the number 3 Greatest Honor. We'll see how much money he takes off the layoff in this race, because Shug McGahee did not pick the easiest spot for him, but he was a horse that generated a lot of buzz on the run up to the Kentucky Derby in 2021, winning a couple preps down at Gulfstream. Obviously, he disappointed a little bit in the Florida Derby before he was put on the shelf, but he's one that I think you do have to have some opinion about. He's coming back off the layoff.
Yeah, if I remember right, I don't think you were either, but I wasn't very high on him last year, even when he was winning his races. Sure, he can come back fine and run a good race, but this just doesn't seem like a great spot. There's not a ton of speed in this race. It's only at 1.16 miles, so he's one that's not going to be on my tickets. And I could say the same exact thing for Dynamic One. He's actually one of the few horses that have come back to win a race after the Wood Memorial, where he first kind of made his name when he won that Curlin Stakes, but then he was very disappointing in the Travers, disappeared again. But he's another I just have my questions about, and he's going to be a short price. Not sure he's going to be favored over Greatest Honor as the morning line has. I would have some serious doubts about that. But in either case, I'm going to be against both of those and look to some other horses. And the one that jumps out to me the most is right on the inside, Wolfie's Dynaghost. He's a horse who's proven pretty fast. He's proven to like a wet track. He's run some nice speed figures, but his best one has come over a wet track when he ran a 120 at Belmont. And for me, most importantly, he looks like he's going to be pretty clear on the lead. The horse shown back in second, pretty big gap to him is Scalding, the 8 horse. And I just don't see him being as quick as Wolfie's Dynaghost. So I just think he's going to be really dangerous in here as lone speed. We don't have the flag as favors early because there's a couple other horses that have run up near the lead in the past, but I just think he's the more quality horse. So I'll say he's definitely going to be an A for me in my top pick. There's a couple others I want to talk about, but I'll throw it back to you first.
Yeah, we have a similar opinion about Greatest Honor. I think we talked about him ad nauseum last year when we were doing the Pacecast in the run-up to the Kentucky Derby. As you said, just not a horse that's particularly fast. He got some good pace setups in the races where he was successful. And frankly, those early season preps at Gulfstream from last year just have not come back that strong. Looking back at the form in retrospect, I was pretty underwhelmed. We'll see if he's an improved 4-year-old off the layoff, but I think this is a pretty tough assignment for him. And I was kind of on the same page as you, where I thought he could go favored here. So I was going to go against him. I'm not, though, against Dynamic One, Craig. His race in the Curlin last year was pretty impressive, and I understand why he took so much support in the Travers off that. Obviously, he didn't run well in the Travers, but something went wrong that day. He was off for a long time after that. I've been watching his recent workouts on XBTV coming back for this layoff, and he has been training very well. His workout 2 back, I think you can check it out from February 26th. Really impressive. He was working with another Pletcher horse whose name I forgot to write down, but he outworked that one, was moving very easily, just looks like a horse that's sitting on a big race. And Dynamic One is a horse that doesn't have to come from quite as far back as Greatest Honor does. It kind of depends on how he breaks out of the gate, how he's feeling, how he's going to run on that day, but he is one that can travel a bit more handily. So I'm hoping that Irad Ortiz can get him into the game a little bit sooner, and I'm also hoping that we get a little bit better than the 5-2 morning line, though I don't want to get my hopes up too much about that because he does go out for some pretty sharp connections. I really have no knocks against Wolfie's Dynaghost and don't disagree with anything you said about him, Craig. He does appear to be the speed of this race, or at least the main speed, and breaking from the inside with Paco Lopez. You've got to imagine they're going to go. I do question the surface with him a little bit. I think it's always been a point of debate what he's best running over, synthetic, turf, dirt, because at different times he's handled all of them. I think a more interesting thing to point out about his form, though, which is not something that I often like to go to as a reason, but I think it's kind of apparent with him, is if you just look at his races when he's run on Lasix, they're undoubtedly his best speed figures. That one big dirt race that he ran back in July of last year at Belmont, his one dirt race with Lasix. His last 3 races that he's put together good effort after good effort, all with Lasix. And he gets to run on Lasix at Tampa Bay Downs on Saturday, something you don't often get to do in graded stakes in this country. So I think that's just something that's interesting to note with Wolfie's Dynaghost, and I'm going to respect him in this race. I'm kind of wondering who the other horse that you want to mention is, Craig. I have one more that I want to go to as well. Mine would be Cody's Wish towards the outside, who's stepping up to make his stakes debut for the first time. A horse that debuted back in the summer at Belmont last year like one that had real ability and was going to make noise in stakes races that summer because it looked like he was progressing so fast, but needed some time to break out of the maiden ranks to figure things out, got some weird trips early in his career, but seems like he's started to put it all together in his last 3 starts, and Bill Mott has kind of developed him slowly, running him through his allowance conditions. I like the approach they've taken with this horse, and I do believe he's got some real talent, and he's got speed figures that stack up against these, so he's the other one I would use.
Yeah, he was one of the other 2 that I want to use. I'm going to go 3 deep in here because I'm not using those 2 morning line favorites. And for all the reasons you mentioned, he ran speed figures that are competitive in here. And I particularly liked his last race, that allowance race at Churchill, where he beat a nice horse in Ducali. And I liked the way he did it. It was a race with no pace at all, really. The pace figures are all in blue. He was well back and last in the field, and he was able to just sweep by all of them. This race didn't get any kind of pace upgrade. It was a race that played straight, and he still was able to run a 1:16 TimeformUS speed figure. So he was just a 3-year-old then. He's obviously still maturing, so I think he's really dangerous in this spot. And the other horse I'm going to use is the 6 Hidden Stash. He's a horse that ran well in the Tampa Bay Derby last year, ran a decent second. He's come back on turf this year, and though he hasn't won, I thought he's run pretty well. He's gotten 1:16 TimeformUS speed figures in both of those efforts, and I don't see any reason he couldn't go back and run something similar on the dirt or better based on what we saw last year. And he's one that I think might get lost in the shuffle and by the bettors.
Before we move on from this race, we should just give a brief mention to the outside drawn runner, Cheryl Spite. Craig, just kind of a curious spot for him that they're trying dirt again, because I know there's no race carded for him on the turf on this card, but I mean, you would think they'd be targeting a turf race, but given how well he's run in his last couple of races on that surface, just weird for them to go back to dirt.
Yeah, I tweeted about this last night. I don't get it at all. Maybe you could have used the excuse if he were adding Lasix that maybe he needed Lasix and didn't run last time, but he's never used it and doesn't seem to need it because he runs fine without it. So the one time he ran on dirt against Mischievous Alex, granted it was a 6 furlong sprint, but he just didn't pick up his feet at all. So I don't get it. I hope he takes some money. I'm not sure who would bet him, especially from that outside post, but I don't want any parts of him.
Moving on to race 9, the grade 3 Florida Oaks going 1.16 miles for the 3-year-old fillies on the grass. And Craig, I don't know about you, but I found this to be the toughest race in the sequence. It is totally wide open. The pace projector is not helping us that much with that no pace marker, the gray flag. So I really don't know what kind of trips a lot of these horses are going to get. And frankly, I don't even know who the horse to beat is. I'm going to throw it to you to let you start because I don't have a good place to begin this one.
I didn't know where to go in this race, so I started where probably most bettors will, and that's with a couple of Chad Brown horses, both ridden by the Ortiz brothers. This one's a little bit tougher, I think, but I think they're certainly both dangerous in here. I'm suspect that we'll get the 9-2 and the 5-1 that the morning line says, particularly when you look at the horses that are shown as the favorites. They just don't look any better to me. So I don't have any knocks on the Chad Brown horses. Spicer obviously ran really well, breaking his maiden at her maiden at Aqueduct with a 98 speed figure. That was back in November. So I don't see why she couldn't win here, but then there's the other Chad Brown horse, the Shipper, who draws Irad Ortiz, first start in the country, and I'm sure you'll tell us more about her as you like to watch these foreign races a little more than I do. I will definitely watch it before Saturday, but she's one that looks pretty dangerous to me. Outside of the Chad Brown horses, the inside horse, Miss Barbara, I think is interesting. She's another coming off a layoff for Mark Cass. She had won a couple on synthetics, but what stuck out to me is she ran 100 speed figure back in September, which is better than most of these have. Yeah, I think it may be the top figure in the field. And I don't think it was any fluke. The horse that was second that day, Pizza Bianca, came back to win an albeit weak version, but she did win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. And from that inside draw, I think she'd be pretty dangerous as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to go in this one. I guess, like you, I'll just mention those two Chad Brown runners. Spicer looks fine. I don't really have a whole lot positive or negative to say about her. She got a very good trip when she won her maiden victory at Aqueduct last time in November. Probably is going to have to move forward a little bit off that performance to beat this field, but certainly possible making her 3-year-old debut. As for that French import, Dolce Zell, I did watch her last race from Longchamp, going 6.5 furlongs on the turf, and I could see why they dipped in to buy her, despite her winning at 24-1 that day, because she was visually impressive. She rated back in last until they got into the stretch. In the straightaway, she passed the entire field, and with a really nice turn of foot. I have no idea what she was beating. The Timeform rating did not come back particularly strong for the race, so it's kind of, the jury's kind of out on how good she is. As for Chad Brown, though, he does not have the best stats with horses like this. I was looking up some numbers in Formulator with 3-year-olds that are foreign shippers and turf routes for his barn over the past 5 years. He's just 3 for 30, 10% with an ROI that's hovering around $1, a $2 ROI hovering around $1. So not the best stats for Chad, and he's a trainer that you can find some positive stats for. So I was going against her a little bit, and if that is her true running style, closing from the back of the pack, that's another reason to be a little skeptical, because horses with tactical speed in this race are few and far between, so that's why I was kind of looking towards the outside. I think the number 7, A Little Love and Luck, projects to get a good trip in this race. She's the one that's shown on the lead on the pace projector, and when we've got that no pace flag, that's a different situation than favors on or near the lead, because it's kind of saying this is a horse on the lead that hasn't really taken advantage of being a front runner in the past, and that is the case with Little Love and Luck. She's really more of a stalking type, but with Paco Lopez aboard, I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to get aggressive with this one, and I think she's just really taken a step forward in her last few races. She's run on all 3 surfaces, synthetic, turf, and dirt, over her last 3 starts, and she's run well every time, and I think that just speaks to the fact that she's a horse for trainer Mike Deeney, who's doing really well right now. She beat a good 1-2 back in Opalina, who came back to run so well behind that 3-year-old budding star, Spenderella, last week at Gulfstream, so I think that form of the Ginger Brew holds up pretty well for Little Love and Luck. And to me, she's kind of the horse to beat in this race. The 2 that are drawn to are outside. I also want to mention Ambitus, who's coming out of a second-place finish to Opalina in the Sweetest Chant. I thought she ran fine that day. That was a race that was kind of falling apart after a horse ran off on the lead. Opalina made the first move, and Ambitus was kind of picking up pieces behind her, but she is one that seems to be stepping forward for Graham Motion. And Craig, the horse that I really wanted to like in this race was the number 8, On Alert, for Shug McGahee. I'm just so concerned about her running style, because she seems like one that has absolutely no early speed, and she doesn't have that much turn of foot either. She's a real grinding type who takes a while to wind up and hit top gear, but her maiden victory 2-back, if you go and watch it, was really impressive. She kind of sliced between horses, one going away. I didn't think she got the best ride last time in a roughly run race when she lost at 6-5, so I feel like On Alert definitely fits with these from a quality standpoint. I just have trouble taking such a deep closer in a race that has no pace.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. These are the toughest races for me, as you said. They're definitely differ from that blue pace flag, and it just depends how the races really develop, because sometimes when there's no pace, I mean, it just doesn't favor the horses in front at all, because everybody stays close and the horses with the best kicks are able to get up. It'll be interesting to see if we do get that rain, what it does to the course, because that tends to favor the horses on the lead in these kind of races. In my opinion, that's usually how it plays out. But hopefully we will have seen a few turf races by this point. At least one, if this one's on the turf. Obviously, the Hillsborough will also be on the turf. And actually, as I look, those are the first ones even carded on the turf. So that'll be our only chance to see it. So yeah, this one is a bit of a head scratcher, and I do think there's a lot of ways you can go.
Yeah, this is one that I'm going to spread quite a bit, and I'm going to try to go a little bit thinner later, so I feel like I can do that in this race, but I would want to use all of the horses that I mentioned. And Craig, I think you even make a good case for that rail-drawn horse, Mrs. Barbara, who does have plenty of turf pedigree, even though she hasn't won on the turf. I think you make a good point about her turf races, and she's another contender in here. Let's move on to the 3-year-old male version, the Columbia Stakes, and this one's going slightly shorter, going a mile on the turf course. We've got some 3-year-old Colton Gelding signed on here, including one main track only entrant. Hopefully that does not come into play, and this race will stay on the turf. And Craig, unlike the race we just talked about, this one has the fast pace flag, as there is a little bit more speed signed on in this race for the 3-year-old males. The morning line is very closely grouped, but I was thinking that there were going to be some horses that took the bulk of the money in this race. And for me, I was assuming those would be the number 3 Kitten Mischief and the number 6 Fort Washington, both horses who look like they have upside for some sharp turf barns.
Yeah, Fort Washington, I definitely think is a horse you have to consider in here. He looked really good at New York. He's been off since November, but his speed figures back then fit nicely in here with any kind of improvement, which you'd expect. I think he's going to be really dangerous. And I'm going to be honest, Kitten Mischief, I was going to kind of leave to you. He's a horse they tried to get on the turf first time out, and off the turf race, and then they kept him on dirt a couple times. Maybe they got a little Derby fever. Not sure what happened there. But I'm curious. He certainly looks like he's bred for grass. If the speed figures transfer, he'll be dangerous in here. But I don't like him as much as I thought I would. But I will be interested to hear your perspective on that one. There were a couple others that I liked in here. And one that really stuck out to me is having a shot, comes out of an allowance race over this Tampa Oval. And that's Ben's Malice on the inside. I actually really liked this race last time, in a race with very little pace. He was able to run a good second, got a good 96 speed figure that day. And I don't see any reason he can't get a similar trip in here with a better pace setup. So he's one I was looking to. And then another horse who's kind of a crazy, I won't say crazy, but he's going to be a longer price, is outside the 9-horse Electrostatic. I know he only ran a 79 his first time out, but that was way back in July for Arnaud Delacour. He's been firing on all cylinders, and I just don't think that speed figure means a whole lot. It hasn't proven the strongest race if you look at the turf run backs, but a lot of horses have won out of that race. Just most of them have been on dirt, but that could be circumstances where that's just where they happen to run. I think that this horse could be a sneaky long shot in here.
Yeah, as for those 2 horses that I think will go favored here, yeah, Craig, I have no knocks against Fort Washington. I kind of viewed him as the horse to beat in this race, and I mean, if he's anything close to that 9-2 morning line, that's quite a bargain on him. I don't think he will be. He just seems way too logical to be that high. He didn't beat the best field at Aqueduct last time, but I just liked the way that he did it. He did seem to face a better field in his debut at Belmont, and I thought he ran well that day after kind of getting a little far back in the early going. He's just a horse that has a relentless late run. The one thing that I might use as a knock against him is when I watched him last year, my impression was that he might want longer, not shorter, and they're turning him back to a mile here. So in typical Shug McGahee fashion, this might just be a starting point for him. This might not be a win-at-all-cost kind of race. So I think that from a talent standpoint, he fits really well, and if the pace does heat up, he's a horse that will benefit. I would just be interested to see how low he goes in terms of price. And as for Kitten Mischief, I got to say, when I saw this horse debut, my note on him was get this horse to turf immediately, because I know he won that dirt race first time out, but if you watch this horse run, I mean, he's got that quintessential turf stride. He's got that real like high knee action, that long stride to him, like he just lopes over the dirt, which you typically would associate with a turf horse, and his pedigree kind of backs it up. His Damn Kids Point was a pretty good turf horse. I think she was one that was excelling in grade 3 races. I believe she won multiple grade 3s, going route distances all the way out to some shorter marathons. So there's a lot of turf breeding, a lot of stamina breeding for this horse. He actually ran better on dirt than I thought he would after his debut, getting on some fast tracks. But I think that Jonathan Thomas is doing the right thing right now, putting him on the turf. And I never have any problem with the Into Mischiefs getting on the turf. I think they handle it very well. And what you said is correct, Craig. This horse was entered for turf in his debut. He was not an MTO in that race. As for some of the others, I did not quite see the same positive things as you about the 1-horse Ben's Malice. I kind of got caught up in the race ratings of those Tampa Bay races. they just seemed weaker to me than what some of the others are coming out of. But horses can certainly improve at this time of year, and Ben's Malus did run well against a slow pace last time. I was a lot more interested in the last horse that you mentioned, the number 9 Electrostatic, for many of the same reasons as you. The runbacks from that race have been strong, as you said. A lot of horses improving out of there. But the thing that I was most taken by was the visual when I went back and watched that race. I mean, this horse did not look like a 2-year-old. He was well developed. If you're somebody who likes a tail, this horse is a very long, majestic one. You can notice it in the replay. No, he traveled really well. He looked like he could take that field over at any time. He was kind of held up in traffic at the top of the stretch, and as soon as he found some room, he burst through professionally and won like a good thing. Despite the speed figure coming back low, that doesn't matter to me so much when a horse is debuting in the summer of his 2-year-old season. So Arnaud Delacour is great numbers off layoffs. This one seems like he's pretty dangerous. Again, don't know that we're going to get 12-1. I don't know exactly where the money's going in this race, but it does feel like he'll be a better price than those 2 that I just mentioned. And those were the ones I was most interested in, so I would try to highlight the price horse among them.
Okay, I do think it's interesting. Neither of us mentioned Gingrich, who's the, I guess, co-second choice on the morning line. But personally, I just don't see that one at all. I don't see anything appealing when I look at his running lines. He hasn't been particularly fast. He hasn't really beaten good horses when he did break his maiden. So for me, maybe it's just a bad morning line because I don't see him at all. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, Gingrich is low on the line. Heaven Street is the morning line favorite, I guess, because Irad Ortiz is riding. I don't know. I didn't love either of those horses. Gingrich, I had the same notes as you. I did not love the Dania Beach as a race overall. I thought it was relatively weak, and he didn't run that well in there. He got a good trip and just didn't have much punch through the stretch. And as for Heaven Street, I don't know. He faced good horses in the Bourbon last year and completely folded up. He's coming back for the Christophe Clement barn now, which admittedly Clement is more of a turf trader than Steve Asmussen is, but still, I thought that he was a little bit opportunistic when he won on the turf last year in some races that were favorable to him at Indiana Grand and Kentucky Downs, and I preferred others.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned him. For some reason in my head, I was just thinking Fort Washington was the favorite, but he wasn't. Yeah, I also completely I don't like him at all. I agree with you. It's just different. He was winning races early in his 2-year-old season, and things tend to change by now. And I think whatever edge he had early on is probably gone.
Well, Craig, let's move on to the feature race, the Grade 2 Tampa Bay Derby, which closes out this Pick 5 sequence, going a mile and a 16th on the dirt for the 3-year-olds. We've got a field of 12 signed on. 5 of those 12 are coming back out of the local prep for this, the Sam F. Davis, and that, of course, was won by Classic Causeway. And Craig, I got to be honest, I looked at this race long and hard, and I just kind of came to the conclusion, why am I supposed to try to beat this horse? I mean, Classic Causeway looked really good last time. He ran a speed figure that puts him in the mix among the top Derby contenders out there. And I just think he looks better than this field.
Yeah, we're thinking similar here. And I'm definitely going to do some spreading in the early races. And this is one I just couldn't see. There's nothing to knock about his last race. He was on the front end, but he was actually battling another horse to get there. They were doing it going pretty quick, and it didn't seem to matter. The horse that ran second that day, Shipsational, it's hard to imagine him getting much of a better trip, and he wasn't all that close. I mean, he ran fine, but is he the main competition? If he is, I just don't see him turning the tables. I guess there's a couple others we should talk about in here. Giant Game, who was entered in that Fountain of Youth last week, comes out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But I think we've seen that race hasn't been very strong. He was terrible in the Holy Bull. And expecting a turnaround of that top form seems like a pretty big stretch to me. There's the horse who won the Iroquois, Major General, is in here. He's 2 for 2. But man, when you look through the chart of that race, it's been pretty ugly. The runbacks have not been good. I think I did the numbers, and the winners are 2 for 21 out of that race. And one of those wins was Strike Hard, who's in that field. He won a pretty modest allowance race in early December at Gulfstream. The other was an allowance win at Oaklawn Park in a 6 furlong race. So it's kind of hard for me to think Major General's going to suddenly come in here and be able to beat a horse like Classic Causeway, because not only has the Iroquois proven weak, I mean, the speed figure was pretty low as well. He only got a 95 for that win, and nothing would indicate that it was wrong. I mean, it's just been a bad race. And I guess the only other horse maybe some people would be interested in is the Chad Brown horse, who broke his maiden first time out coming from way back here at Tampa. Money Supply. And I guess if I had to make a second choice, it would be him, just because I don't care for any of the others. But for one, I doubt he's going to be 10-1 just because of the lack of options in here. And two, I just don't know. I guess maybe I could use him as a C if my ticket came out cheaper than I thought, but I'm going to lean really heavily on Classic Causeway.
Yeah, I handicapped this race before I saw the morning line, and I just kind of assumed Money Supply was going to be the second choice. I don't know about you, Craig. It just kind of felt that way. I mean, it feels like the morning line maker kind of underrated Chad Brown throughout this sequence, which is a little surprising to me. But Money Supply, yeah, I figured he would take a lot more money, no pun intended, than the 10-1 he's listed at here. I'm not going to be surprised if he's half that price. But yeah, we had talked about his debut race quite a bit on the Pacecast, Craig. I know that was a difficult speed figure day when Beyer had the race very fast, and it kind of, if you use the same variant for the entire card, that was the same day as the Sam F. Davis, you would have had that race very fast. I think it went faster than some stakes races later on the card, but just a little hard to buy for so many first-time starters coming out of that race. And we've actually seen one run back coming out of that Money Supply race. And even with you using a different variant, Craig, early in the day, I believe you broke out the first two races on the card. The horse that ran back out of that race, I think, regressed by almost 20 points. So I'm a little skeptical of whether that Money Supply race was all it was cracked up to be. Maybe the track really did change that day. So, and furthermore, he's a son of Practical Joke, and I was never one that was in the camp that Practical Joke was going to be a classic distance sire, and we just have not seen the progeny of Practical Joke have much success going longer yet. So I'm a little skeptical of him. Craig, just circling back to Classic Causeway and why I'm not really against him. I know that the pace projector has that red flag for this race indicating a fast pace. I feel like it's one of these situations, though, where it's just purely due to the fact that there's 12 horses in the race, and the pace projector is just always kind of geared towards putting up that fast pace flag when you got a large field on the dirt. But looking through this race, there's really not that much speed. They're not horses to go with Classic Causeway for sure. I mean, remember the Sam F. Davis, that was a race that had a lot of speed on paper. Not the case here. I mean, I guess Trademark might get a more aggressive ride from the inside, but I don't see anybody else that can apply serious pressure to Classic Causeway.
No, he's the only horse listed as a leader or speed horse. There's a bunch of trackers, and as you say, the field size has something to do with it. This tends to happen in these 3-year-old preps because a lot of horses have only run a few times. They might only have a maiden win, and most of them will have done so closer on or near the lead. But yeah, when you see that clear space between him and the second horse, he just looks like the speed of the race despite that fast pace flag. And tough for me to come up with anybody else, as I said. And sometimes when you spread in the early legs, I don't mind latching onto a short price favorite that I really think has a very high probability of winning the race.
Yeah, when I was putting together my picks for this race, I was actually gravitating more towards some of the horses that finished behind Classic Causeway in the Sam F. Davis when I was kind of rounding out my picks below him, rather than some of the new faces, because like you, Craig, I was not interested in Major General or Money Supply or Giant Game. I think Shipsational is actually the biggest rival to Classic Causeway once again. I mean, he's run the second fastest speed figures in the race. If the track does come up wet, Shipsational is the one horse in this race that's run well over wet tracks in the past. So I think he's a major player in here. And the other horse that I would give another shot to out of the Sam F. Davis, not necessarily to upset Classic Causeway, but if you're playing exotics or if you want to use a big price as a backup in a pick 5 sequence, a distant backup, the number 2, Trademark, a horse that, if you go back and watch the Sam Davis, did not get the best ride or trip. They were not aggressive with him that day, or maybe he just wasn't quick enough to get to the lead in a race with a lot of other speed horses. But you could see for the first 3/8 of a mile, he just never settled. He was extremely rank, and I know he lost by a large margin, but his race was over in the opening furlongs. He just really was uncomfortable rating. So I'm gonna guess that they'll get more aggressive with him in this race, whether he's just ahead of Classic Causeway and Classic Causeway sits off him, or he is stalking outside Classic Causeway. We'll see. But Trademark ran well enough in his final 2 starts of 2021 that he's one that I would give one more shot to if he's going to be somewhere around that 30-1 morning line.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I agree that Chip Sachenal is probably the second most likely to win. Maybe Classic Causeway, if the track is wet. We haven't seen him do it. I guess that would be the one question mark. But wet tracks today, it's not like the old days, I don't think. The track maintenance does a really good job, and especially when the rain's supposed to stop early in the card, I would imagine it's going to be a pretty normal track by this time.
Well, Craig, let's do our brief recap. I think we were pretty much in agreement with how we're going to structure this sequence, maybe just using a few different horses in some of the races. But for me, in the Hillsborough, I was primarily on Runaway Rumor with Lady Spitespear as my primary backup. And I was going a little bit against both of those Chad Brown runners in that race, acknowledging they can win, but I preferred others. In the Challenger, I like Dynamic One, and the other two that I was most interested in are Wolfie's Dynaghost and Cody's Wish. They were the main 3 for me in that race. In the Florida Oaks, I'm just going to try to spread and get through it. I would use all 4 horses drawn towards the outside from Spicer on out through Ambitious with a little love and luck. Maybe my slight top pick, also using On Alert, and even probably throwing in that horse Craig mentioned, Mrs. Barbara. And then the Columbia, the 10th race, I am not against the horses that I think are going to take money like Fort Washington and Kitten Mischief, but I do like that number 9 Electrostatic quite a bit, and he's one that I'm going to try to get into this sequence. And then I'll just close things out with Classic Causeway, leaning heavily on him. Maybe slight backups to Chip Sachenal and Trademark, but I would want most of my play to be going through Classic Causeway.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to use, I believe, 4 horses in that first leg. Lady Spitespear, Runaway Rumor, and both of the 2 Chad Brown horses. In the Challenger, I really do like Wolfie's Dynaghost. I'm going to lean on him pretty good while using Hidden Stash and Cody's Wish as well. The 9th, I am similar, going to spread quite a bit. I will use the Dolce Giselle and Spicer, the 2 Chad Browns. But I guess if I had to make a top pick in there, I'd probably go with Miss Barbara. The Columbia, that one is a little bit, I like the horse Ben's Malice, I like Fort Washington, and Electrostatic. So I'm going to go at least 3 deep in there. And then in the Tampa Bay Derby, basically a single with, as a matter of fact, it will be a single for me with Classic Causeway.
Yeah, if you could turn a pick 5 into a pick 4, it allows you to spread a little bit in some other races. We'll see. I'm sure a lot of people will be singling Classic Causeway, Craig, but he just seems like he really towers over that field. So hopefully we gave out some good opinions earlier on in the sequence. I know we highlighted a few price horses. We'll see how the races get bet and if those horses do turn out to be the prices that we think they'll be. Craig will be back to recap these races next Tuesday for the Pacecast and hopefully getting a little more clarity on that Kentucky Derby trail. We had a lot to recap last week. Hopefully we don't have a Pacecast that's quite as long next week.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. My voice was running out. I imagine this one will be quite a bit shorter, but I will definitely be watching all these races. There's some other good cards around the country as well, so just another good Saturday of racing, and enjoy it because I think it's the last Derby prep for a few weeks.
Everybody, remember you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for listening this week, and make sure to tune into that TimeformUS Pacecast coming up next Tuesday.